Recording in progress.
Is Scott with us in Zoom land?
He's online, yeah.
Hari Om, Scott.
Hi, Hari Om. I am here.
So where are we in our text?
56. Page 148.
I think we're starting a new section, if I recall.
Chapter 5, Section 2. Kinds of love divine. Secondary love divine. Based on quality of persons and types of their demands, threefold is love inferior. Each succeeding compared to the preceding becomes greater.
Okay.
Sutra 56. Gauni Tridha Guna Bhedat Adar Debhedadva. The secondary devotion is of three kinds, according to the difference in the mental disposition of the devotee, or according to the type of discontentment in the devotees.
So we've had this higher Padma Prema, higher devotion, which he's discussed, and now those less pure, less purely motivated devotions. So let's see what they are.
Uttarasma Duttarasma Purva Purva Shayai Bhavati. Then each succeeding one, each preceding one becomes the nobler, the greater.
Yes. So we may start with more impure motives, but we develop deeper devotion, which then moves us to a purer form. A worldly example, the love of an infant for its mother is feed me. That's it. Tremendous attachment develops. But for a long time, mother is the one who provides the child's needs. Then I always think of, I don't know about college kids in India, but certainly here, I'll speak for myself. I would go home with a bag full of dirty laundry in the back seat and an empty wallet. I'd arrive. What's for dinner, Mom? Get my laundry done. And then I'm out of money. But then as we mature more, we go see our mother just out of love. So even with this worldly love, it leaves the place of getting something from God. Loving God for God's sake. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
That's it for that section. Chapter 6, Section 1. Practice of love divine. Easy to practice. Easier is devotion than others, being self-evident, needing no other proofs to prove it in the least, and of the form of peace bliss inherent.
So we many times have the question, how am I doing in my sadhana? Am I meditating correctly? Am I practicing viveka and vairagya in the proper manner? Am I doing my mantra properly? Am I all these various practices in jnana yoga? We can doubt and question. Or if you're a Raja Yogi, are you doing your asana correctly? You're doing your pranayama in an effective way. Even japa, oh, I've been practicing japa so long, am I doing it the right way? But the cool thing about love, first of all, it's easy to do. And it is self-evident when we're doing it. Wow. I think today is the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows in the Catholic Church. Alexa, when is the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows?
Here's something I found on the web. According to tfp.org, September 15th is the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows.
So it's probably why the Divine Mother is in my mind. So Susali, you're a mother. Do you know it when you love your children?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just,
It's just there.
yeah.
It's just there. You don't doubt that you love them. You may doubt that you're serving them properly, you're raising them properly, but you don't doubt that you love them. So also for our love of God. We know it when we're loving. And it's its own fulfillment as well as its own. Oh, Jim, I want to study the Vedanta scriptures. I'll go take a Sanskrit class. Oh, I want to practice Hatha yoga, but I haven't been able to touch my toes in decades. Neat thing about love, there's no precondition. So it's easy and available to everyone. Any thoughts on this? But how do you love, Jim? How do I love God? Yet there's nothing there. It's abstract. It's empty. I don't have samadhi. How do I love God? We start by turning our mind there. To God is I understand God or don't understand God. You can start by just saying words of devotional prayer, of song, of kirtan, of bhajan, puja. The more you do it, our hearts will warm to the process. So, unlike the West, even today in India, the vast majority, at least for some of the classes, of marriages are still arranged. they're still arranged. And the underlying idea is you don't fall in love with someone. You learn to love someone. You don't fall in love. You grow in love. You rise in love. And it's the same with God. We learn to love by loving. And just like any relationship, you have to put the time in. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Anyasmat salabhyam bhakto. Then all other paths, yogas, etc., devotion is readily available, easily attainable.
So the other paths may be difficult and hard, but the path of devotion is easily attained. And again, I go to the Christian scripture. When the young man asked Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? 613 commandments in the Torah. And Jesus answered, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second commandment is like unto the first. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law. It's all we need to do. Then the young man says, who's my neighbor? That's another story. Next verse.
Pramana. Antarasyanapekshatvat swayam pranatvat. Pramanatvat. Because love depends on no other proof, it is in itself being of the nature of a proof. Love is self-evident.
So, if I were to say, are you chanting your mantra? Prove it. See, these are my beads. See how worn they are? That proves that to you. Are you going on pilgrimage? Yes. Prove it. My shoes are worn out. But love is its own proof. Do you love your husband? Show me the love. Do you have 10 quarts of love or 15 quarts of love? But you know when you're loving. Feel it. You know it. It is its own pramana. Its own means, its own proof. So the human mind has this incredible capacity to abide in the self. There is no difference between the samadhi of the yogis, the atmaramana of the Vedantas, and the parama prema all the same. All the same. Next one.
Shanti Rupat Param Ananda Rupat Pacha.
I like this one.
Also because love is of the nature of peace and it is of the nature of supreme bliss.
So when you are in the arms of your beloved in a worldly sense, in those moments of great intimacy, after perhaps the passion, the afterglow, peace, great happiness. That's a taste of your self-nature. There's not worldly love and divine love. It's an illusion. We either experience through the medium of the love for another person, or without the medium of God. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Next section, chapter 6, section 2, practice of love divine, obstacles in practice.
Aha!
To the Lord, having dedicated himself and his worldly and heavenly affairs, it behooves him not to worry of the worldly calamities. When love is still unattained, activities in the world are not to be scorned, but fruit discarded, acts should be performed. Discussion on women, wealth, and enemies is not to be heard. Pride, vanity, and the like are firmly to be erased. All actions to him having surrendered, desire, pride, anger, and the like in him should be expressed, dissolving 3 factors of experience. As a servant or as a wife, love alone must we pursue. Love alone must we pursue.
Interesting stuff. Let's start with the first verse.
Lokahano chinta na karya niveditatma loka vedashilatvat. No worry or anxiety should be entertained at the worldly losses, as it is the nature of a true devotee to constantly surrender his limited self and all its secular and sacred activities to the Lord of his heart.
So we've all heard stories, maybe you have done this or your children. The youngster leaves their responsible life, maybe school or career, but mommy, I'm in love. Went off chasing the boyfriend or the girlfriend. You ever had kids do that? Do that yourself. Power of that kind of passion. So we are built to be able to let go of the world very easily. Making great sacrifices. Oh, honey, don't leave. I know your husband is all the way in another country, but we want you near us. I'm sorry, mommy, I love you. So one of the byproducts of living the life of the bhakta, the devotee, is you don't worry about the world because God is in charge. One of the things that you can only acquire through time as a yogi. I've been doing this now for 46 years. Actually, before I met Swamiji, I was out with that. I have maybe 50 years of empirical evidence that God will take care of me. Not once have I been cast into outer darkness. Not once have I been thrown into the abyss. Doesn't mean this one's life hasn't had a lot of dose of success and failures, joys and sorrows. But it's all gonna work out. So this chintya, this worry, the devotee can let go. There's a phrase that they use in the 12-step programs that I love. We make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care. I can't, he can, then go let it. Get out of the way. And the immediate fruit of this, down comes the anxiety. Other things that help, just borrowing from the 12 steps, one day at a time. People will come, oh, Jim, I have no idea what the future is going to bring. How am I going to be dealing with my retirement 10, 15 years from now? Blah, 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 blah. Not saying don't plan. There's everything we need today. Any thoughts on this? I love what Swami Tejo Mayananda used to say. Do you know how to get rid of all your worries? Quit worrying. How do I quit worrying, Jim? Give your life to God. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Na tada siddho loka vyavaharo heyaha kintu phalatyagaha tat sadhanam cha karyameva. Till such a consummate love is not gained, or on attaining the consummate love, worldly activities are not to be abandoned. But certainly we must diligently pursue love and learn to renounce our anxiety to enjoy the fruit of our activities.
So here the injunction is beware of what I call sour grape renunciation or phony renunciation. And my own personal experience about it. When I was very young, I used to have terrible performance anxiety when I was performing as a singer. And I can remember this vividly. I was living in San Diego at the time, so I was about 22 probably. And there was this Italian restaurant, and young singers would come and sing Italian songs and arias and stuff like that. So I went, I was going to sing first performance at this place. And I was so nervous. And I got up and my knees were shaking and I could barely breathe. And, I made it through the song. And I came off the stage, wasn't a yogi at all. I said, this is just too painful. I'm going to give it up. But of course, I had the deep vasana to be a singer. So it was phony renunciation, sour grape renunciation. So here, what the verse is inviting us to do, live our lives, but give the results to God. In Gita, Krishna says, I am the karma phala data. I am the giver of fruits. So if the endeavor is successful, glory goes to God. But if it's a screw up, it's egg on God's face, not mine. Give both success and failure to God. And this helps us be free from the anxiety, the performance anxiety of life. So if you're a surgeon doing an operation, if your mind isn't, oh, am I doing? God, I hope I don't stab and kill the patient. You're much less likely to do well than if your attention is on completely what you're doing. It's the truth about everything. If we're caught up in anxiety and worry, vulture that sits on our shoulder. How am I doing? Am I okay? What do they think of me? Very painful. For the premi, how do we do it? Give everything to God. Good and my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and any thoughts on this? Many, many years ago, I was walking down Mission Street with this friend of mine, Ray Hugh. He'd been in AA a long time. And we walked by this doorway, and there was a wine out passed out in the doorway. Ray was incredible this way. Stooped down and shook the guy and said, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Ray let him sleep. As we finished walking, he turns to me and says, "There's another failed perfectionist." Perfectionism is a klesha. It's an affliction. It's a dosha. It's a defect. Doesn't mean we don't strive for excellence, but that's different than perfectionism. Perfectionism is when I have stress and anxiety if I don't meet some internalized goal. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Stri dhana nastika charitra nashravaniyam. Seekers should not listen to descriptions of women, wealth, atheists, and enemies.
So this is kind of a riff on what we talked about, Du Sangha, remember? We had Satsang, company of truth, company of the wise, and Du Sangha, lower companions. Of course, the most insidious lower companions are the one in between our ears. So the idea here is this tremendous power of the attentive faculty, what I call the law of the third eye. So if you have a bicycling helmet with a lamp on the front of it, any of you have one of those? So when you're riding your bicycle, you can point the light where you turn your head. So our attentive faculty is like that. What you look at, we're going to think about and talk about. What you look at repeatedly, you're going to think about and talk about repeatedly. Repeated thought becomes habituated thought. Habituated thought sinks into the unconscious and becomes the law of our lives. So, for example, in Narcotics Anonymous or Crystal Meth Anonymous, in those meetings, they have a meeting rule. The speaker is discouraged from romanticizing their drug use in their share. Do they have the same kind of thing in FA?
Yes.
You don't sit up there and talk about how great the chocolate cake is.
Okay. No,
Why?
because it could trigger a member.
Say it again.
It could trigger someone that is listening.
Yeah, it triggers us. We start thinking about the pleasure we had from this, that, and the other thing. Now you have to understand here that the target audience for most of these scriptures are teenage or early 20-year-old Brahmin boys. Things are different now. Women are included in spiritual development, and it's open to everyone. Also understand that if you were a young person, you had a couple choices available to you. You could become a sannyasi, or you can get married. So let's take it into the 21st century. I am not a moralist. There is nothing wrong morally in, say, looking at pornography. But if you're committed to a monogamous relationship, what's likely to happen if you spend time looking at pornography? You're going to be tempted to cheat on your spouse. Keep at it. You know, if you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're probably going to get a haircut. If you're working on, for example, refraining from malicious gossip at work too frequently in the work environment, workers go out, have a few beers, and spend their time trashing upper management. You may go out with the friends thinking, I just want to socialize, knowing that what they're going to do is trash talk people. Think you're not going to participate. We can list contemporary example after contemporary example. What we're talking about here is what Yogananda used to say: environment is stronger than will. What you put your attention on, you're going to think about. What you hang out with other people and talk about, you're going to think about. Think about it enough, off you go. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Abhimana dam Abhimana damha digam tyajyam. Pride, vanity, and such other negative urges of the mind should be given up.
So pride and vanity are the results in the mind when I think I am the doer. Probably the most difficult place for ego to situate itself is to be a fellow among fellows, a worker among workers. Just a member of the human condition. I can remember I had a boss, and I said something like, well, welcome to being an ordinary human being. And it was fascinating, his reaction. I'm not ordinary, I'm exceptional. And you could just see in his psyche grabbing that. Why do you think he had to grab that idea? What do you think he really felt about himself?
The complete opposite.
Hmm?
The complete opposite that he's
Yeah,
saw clearly.
I'm not okay. So pride and vanity are frequently mechanisms in the psyche to try to deal with low self-esteem. I need to puff myself up because I don't feel like I'm very worthwhile. And it's a gaping hole that cannot be filled by externals. The person who comes to mind right now is Judy Garland. I mean, what an incredible artist. She was loved by her fans. She was the first to admit she loved her fans, but it didn't fill up the hole inside. It wasn't enough. I think of our former president who insisted that everybody, praise him all the time. I'm remembering a film of one of the cabinet meetings where everybody went around to tell Trump how wonderful he was. Why do you think he had a need? So if you're identified with ego, the safest place to be is ordinary. I'm just a human. I'm one with everybody. Yeah, but you should see what my mind is like, Jim. I tell you, 99% of the things you're thinking and feeling, everybody else does too. Welcome to the human condition. Now, the higher way to be freed from pride and vanity Be empty. Don't try to be spiritual, be authentic. Don't try to be a Mahatma, be Brahman. Now, listen very carefully. If you've been on the path for any length of time, ego will start to use the path itself as a possession. You're going to want other people to know how spiritual you are. When you go to an event, you're going to have a persona of spirituality that you present. I have a dear friend who's a psychotherapist, and he said one of the most uncomfortable places he can go is a social event with other psychotherapists, because they're all psyching you out all the time. Did you, when you were in that environment, did you have that feeling?
I was lucky not to. No, I didn't. Because we were all students at that time, so we were all at the same spot. So there was not so much posing, I guess.
Yes. But the idea is the same. So make sure you don't have your spirituality as some sort of possession. And it happens in India because there's great honor given to sadhus. If you're a sannyasi and you're in the orange robes, oh, they treat you like a god. So giving up pride and vanity. How do we do that? When it comes to our position in the world, be a seva. Tell me what a seva is.
Servant.
Servant, yes. Any social situation, take on the idea, how can I be of service?
But even that, I think that, when you're being of service, it's like still this, am I doing enough? Like you do service and like, oh, I have to go ask more of you, and then you're like, oh, am I doing enough?
You know, am I the worst servant or am I the best servant?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
And then the idea of service is to put your mind on other people around the task. But keep serving. And if you're doing service from a codependent place, I want a reward, I want people to notice how much I'm serving. Don't worry, in time, people will ignore you. Again, the Master Jesus said, if you're going to give your gift to the temple, to someone, do it secretly. But I mean, simple things like, anybody here have social anxiety, like if you're at a party or something like that? Anybody suffer from that? Very simple thing to do. When you're there, start picking up the empty glasses. Go into the kitchen and empty the trash. Find the wallflower, the person who's by themselves glued against the wall, and go over to them. And don't dump on them. No, you ask them, how are you doing? And listen. It's amazing. Amazing how much more comfortable we'll feel. Be of service. Any thoughts on this? All right, next one.
तदर्पिता खिलाचारः सन कामक्रोधाभिमान आदिकं तस्मिन्नेव करणीयम्. Having dedicated all activities unto him, one should turn all his desire, anger, pride, and so on towards him alone.
Yes. So this is antithetical to most of us who've been raised Christian. We're afraid of blaspheming. God, I'm pissed at you. Oh, really? Whack with a thunderbolt. That's what we're afraid of. See? Jews argue with God. I can't remember which prophet was it. Was it Jonah who screams, "You duped me"? Anybody remember which prophet was?
Well, that was eternal suffering. One, I'm blocking on the name.
I'm doing the same thing.
It's not Jacob. It's a famous story. God had a discussion with the devil and said, "I bet I could turn a good man towards me." And I can't believe I can't remember the name. So he visited him with family calamities and physical calamities.
Is this Job?
Job.
Oh, it could be. Anyway, the whole point is Jews can argue with God. Lot makes deals with him. Find 100 good men, will you spare the city?
That's right.
What about 10? What about 1? So and I can't remember, is it Karna who hates Krishna all the time? Is that the one?
Yes,
Yeah. And what happens to him in the end?
he gets moksha, he gets liberated. Or you're thinking Guns, actually.
Who?
Guns, his evil uncle.
Yeah. How do
Yeah.
you spell it?
Kamsa.
Kamsa, yeah.
Yeah. So Krishna and him end up fighting, and Krishna kills him, but he gets liberated because
Yes.
he hated him and he was killed at his hands.
Because why did he get liberated? This is the best part of the story. What did he think about all the time?
Krishna.
Yes. 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 So again, we're talking about the lower form of devotion here. So if your life sucks, you tell God about it.
Oh, this reminds me, Ramana Maharshi was asked once about the responsibility of fixing the world. He said, "God make it a mess, let him clean it up."
But it's okay. It's okay. God's not going to strike you down for blaspheming. If you take your anger or your pain or your anguish, your sorrow, God, how could you have taken my little brother? I am so angry at you. That's the best you can do. Give it. Keep turning the mind to God. And again, going back to that prayer, my God, I'm willing for you to have all of me, good and this is also for us to understand. I think it's in the Hebrew scripture, might be in the Christian scripture. The eye of God is too pure to behold iniquity. God's love is a constant. You can't piss God off. You can't offend God. The other thing that's implied here is we don't want to be a goody-goody. You want to be able to tell the truth about what's going on in your heart. Oh, I'm not willing to admit that I'm hurt so badly by so-and-so, I hate them. I don't want God to see it. God sees it. God, I'm so angry at so-and-so. I want to hurt them. I feel vengeful. I feel violence. That's what's the truth. I don't want to feel it, but that's what I feel. I'm going to give it to you. Always give everything to God. Rather than trying to solve our own problems, give them. God, I don't know what to do. Goddamn contractor keeps getting sick. Can't finish the house. I'm irritated and pissed. I want the house to be finished. Give it to God. God, I don't like who I become when I get pissed at my husband. I can't deal with it. It's too hard. Too reactive, God. You understand the practice. All these are how to develop the lower forms of love. Everything. All right. How many more in this chapter? Is this the end of it?
Or one more.
One more.
But do you mind going like a minute or two over?
No.
All right, one more.
Trirupa Bhanga Purvakam Nitya Dasa Nitya Kanta Bhajanatmakam Prema Karyam Premeva Karyam. Going beyond the three factors of experiences, love consisting of constant service, as in the case of a devoted servant or wife, alone should be practiced.
So going beyond, I don't know what these three are. Is it the knower, knowing, and known? Probably in Swamiji's commentary, he'll talk about it.
See it either. Transcending the triple form with the three distinctions. Not sure.
Doesn't matter. There are so many threes, gross, subtle, etc. But the whole idea here is take again the attitude of the servant, dasa. Here he says, dasa is another word for servant. And the metaphor here is like a wife or a servant. At the cultural context, wives are subservient to their husbands, servants are subservient to their masters. But it is of value to take on the position of life. What am I here to do? To serve your holy people, God. That's my job. It's not about getting my needs met. It's about being useful, being used. Living a life of a servant. And that is even more so when you're put in positions of leadership. So if you're a physician and you're head of anesthesiology at a department, what basically you're doing there, you serve the other anesthesiologists.
If you want the thing to run smoothly.
Servant leadership. Servant leadership. So the premi is also the dasa, the seva. And I think I've shared this with you before. You know, today they call Swamiji Puja Gurudev. Puja means worshipful. Gurudev, divine teacher. Never called it that. Nobody called it that. Swamiji. But once when asked, well, in the Chinmaya mission, what's your title, Swamiji? Thought for a moment and he said, Mukha Seva, which means head servant. One of my favorite stories, this was in 1988. And I was in Siddhabadi. We were studying Vivekachudamani. And the tradition, the custom in those days is the brahmachari course would finish and they'd all come up to Siddhabadi and then they'd have other delegates there. And Swamiji would teach Vivekachudamani himself, about 6-8 weeks, I can't remember. So in the front were all the brahmacharis in their yellow robes, you know, they would be chanting and stuff like that. One of the brahmacharis went to the kitchen staff and said, we're brahmacharis now, you should serve us first before the other ones. Word got back to Swami. He had volcanic anger. He said, you did what? And he said this to all the brahmacharis, you have dishonored me. You have dishonored the Chinmaya mission for the whole rest of the camp. You will eat last and you will serve all the rest of the delegates at mealtime. He was just furious at them because they did not understand what the position was now. They were in positions of leadership. All right, here's a good place to stop. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamabhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. What was the last teaching of Jesus before the Ascension? Anybody remember? Feed my sheep, tend my flock, feed
What? No, put money in the collection plate? Isn't it funny that that's how it turned out?
And another one of the most famous stories. There's a ritual in the Catholic Church called the mandatum, which literally means a commandment. Very interesting why it's not a sacrament. It's just one of the few things Jesus said, do this. So Jesus and the disciples, they make their way into Jerusalem for the Passover. And he tells somebody, go talk to so-and-so who has an upper room, we're going to observe the Passover there. So this is where they were going to do their Passover Seder. And what does he do before dinner? Anybody know? Takes off his cloak, puts a towel around his waist, gets out a bowl of water, and washes the feet of every one of his disciples. They're all freaked out. Because in that culture, servants did that. Masters did it. He said to me, this is what you need to do.
And how do you spell what it's called?
Mandatum, Mandatum.
I've never heard of that phrase before.
The foot washing. But he commanded them to do it. And it's very interesting because the sacrament is supposed to be instituted by Christ for grace, etc. Confirmation is not in there, if you notice. He never had a confirmation ritual. That's a sacrament. Anyway, later, dudes. Thank you all. Bye, Scott.